Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a disturbing nature.
And we're not going to hold back on the graphic details and disturbing content.
So we do not recommend our podcast for children under the age of 13.
And while we respect the victims and their families involved in these tragic cases,
we're also going to be critical of mistakes that are made during the investigations.
And we're going to use dark humor to express ourselves now and then.
So with that said, this podcast may not be for everyone.
And that's okay. We're glad you're here checking us out.
And if you've made it this far, welcome to the Unsung Murder Ballads family. And follow us on Instagram at Unsung Murder Ballads if you want to talk to us.
Hey everybody, before we begin, we just wanted to take a moment to let you know that we're going to be doing this episode a little differently in that, yes, Samuel Little is the most prolific American serial killer, and he has a lot of victims. But because of the nature of his crimes, the way he had a very specific MO, we didn't want to spend a lot of time repeating ourselves and going over the same basic details over and over again. So in that regard, we're going to not include a lot of the murders themselves. We're going to be discussing deeper issues, and we hope that's okay. We will have a moment at the end where we list the entire known victim list, like the victim count, but we're going to be focusing on a couple different things throughout this episode, so it's going to be a little different than usual, and we hope that's okay. We'll see you on the other side. Hey everybody, welcome back to Unsung Murder Ballads. This is episode 137. I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
Well, all right. So thank you everyone for coming back. Last week we had some technical issues, but hopefully those are out of the way now, I hope.
TBD.
Hopefully it's a one and done,
Well, we've had, actually, despite all that, I was paying attention to some other podcasters and people who do YouTube videos. We've been lucky to not have had as many issues as some other creators. We haven't had entire files disappear. We haven't had nights where we have had nights where one of our mics completely crashed because we lost Joyous
Yeah,
once.
that's true.
Yeah. But we haven't had nearly as many as some of what I'm seeing. Like, there was one YouTube channel I was watching and the girl's microphone completely went on the fritz, but she didn't know it. And then rather than re-record the whole thing, she just posted it the way it was. And it was really annoying, but at least she did it.
Oh, I hate that.
That's kind of the problem with reactionary content, is that you lose that freshness if you try to re-record something. So
It's true. It's hard to fake it.
yes it is. So speaking of technical errors, I lost the file on the case I was going to do tonight, so we're going to do one we've talked about, and I, for whatever reason, held off on it. I think I might have wanted to rework this a little bit, but I decided, you know what, it's time, especially after that technical difficulty. We're finally going to cover a case that Joyous knows better than Jameson does.
Holy crap.
Whoa.
What?
Yep. Tonight we are covering the case of Samuel Little, the most prolific serial killer in United States history.
Fuck this guy.
Yeah, he sucked. He sucked pretty bad. We're going to cover it. He's a shitty person, but I hate to say it, that's kind of what we cover here. Shitty people for the most part.
It's true.
So, and people have requested this in our comments, and we had talked about doing it months ago. We were going to have Joyous do it, and then all sorts of stuff happened, and that just never happened. So tonight I'm presenting it. So here we go. This is going to be an interesting one because it's less reactive on her part, I think.
Well, I feel like I will still emotionally react anew upon hearing. I don't know all the details. I know it because I did a little bit of research, because I was like, yo, this is fucked up, and it's just like fucked up in a way that I think specifically needs to be talked about.
Right.
But that doesn't mean every single detail doesn't suck so much to hear.
Right. And there have been cases I've covered, like Bundy, where he's been so famous, and even all the details, even Jameson was like, what the fuck? Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's true.
All right. So without a teaser, we're just going to dive right in, because the one teaser I was going to use, I don't want to ruin early on. So we're just going to roll with this.
All right, let's jump in.
Samuel Little was born in June of 1940 in the small town of Reynolds, Georgia. Little told the FBI that his mother had abandoned him as a baby. And while that's difficult to confirm, it's really difficult to confirm anything about his childhood, investigators believe that Little's mother may have been a sex worker, and it's suspected that he was born during a period of time while she was in prison. which is weird.
Oof.
You'd think that would be more better documented, but apparently it wasn't.
But this is, you just said 1940, right?
Yeah, this is in 1940. So obviously
Yeah.
pre-computer, barely had telephones, I think. I don't even remember.
Right, and it's like, how much do people really care about women in prison in 1940? Enough to keep records? I don't know.
Probably
I
not.
wonder if she even received medical care.
That's true too, because we're talking African American, so probably not very much. Yeah, you're right. They probably didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
So regardless of the circumstances, Little would eventually end up in Ohio being raised by his grandparents. Now, he claimed that his first homicidal and violent urges emerged when he was 7 or 8 years old.
Wow.
Which is fucking
Really?
crazy.
He told writer Jillian Lauren about one of his third grade classmates. He started telling her that there was a girl that had green eyes and curly red hair, and apparently she would often stare at Little while he was sitting in class, and she would touch her neck and stuff. And from that point forward, he grew an obsession with women's necks. And this leads to
Oh.
part of his MO. Because his MO of
Also,
choice...
interesting that he's a kid. This is probably 1940, early 1950, but in an integrated school?
Interesting that you said that. I didn't catch that either. But yeah, he said it was a girl with green eyes and red hair. So yeah, it must have been integrated.
Very interesting.
Or
This
it's
is
something out on like the schoolyard. He does say a third
maybe,
grade
yeah.
classmate. So we're talking 8 years old. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, 1948. That is,
In Georgia.
no, maybe I should. Oh no, in Ohio, right?
Oh,
You
you're right.
said?
Ohio.
Born in
That's
Georgia,
right.
but living in Ohio.
Correct.
But, all
Well,
right,
to-
well,
well, to be
there's
honest-
a note to self to learn a little more of that history.
Right, but even Boston didn't desegregate their schools until much later. So,
Right.
so who knows? Maybe he's lying. It's
Could be.
entirely possible, yeah. But anyway, that's what he had told one of those writers that were writing about him. And according to him, it was that little thing that she did that led him to have strangulation as part of his MO.
Bizarre. It could have been all made up, yeah.
Yeah. So we did a little extra research here, and we learned that in some places in Ohio, the schools were still segregated, but in separate classrooms. So you had both black and white students in the same building, just not in the same classrooms. Figured you might want to know that. So while the intimate details of Samuel Little's upbringing are mostly a mystery to the public, we do know that his first run-in with the criminal legal system came at a young age when he was only 13 years old. He was caught stealing a bike. He was sent to a juvenile reform school, and this place was called the Boys Industrial School. So
Interesting. After one theft,
after
he's
one
just
theft,
sent away.
but again, 1950s at this point,
course.
and he's a black boy. He's not even a man yet.
Yeah.
I'm not
Of course, they're gonna
surprised.
find the closest thing they can do to send him to prison.
Right. They probably didn't know what to do. And they were just like, ship him off.
School to prison pipeline. There
Right.
it is.
And
Yep.
what I find interesting that it was an industrial school, meaning that he's learning like a trade, if it's
Mm-hmm.
what it sounds like.
Probably.
Assuming they allow him to learn said trade.
Again, tough to say. 1950s Ohio. It's funny how like it's only 70 years ago, and yet it feels way too much time.
Otherworldly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this was the first in a string of interactions Samuel Little would have with cops, the courts, and the law. Now, as we have discussed in the past, places like the boys' industrial schools, they rarely have good reputations. And maybe, in the beginning, these schools were well-intentioned. They were first created by so-called reformers who believed that children could avoid the same criminal punishment process as adults. And maybe these people believed that kids, unlike adults, really could change, so they thought they deserved a better way. But good intentions don't hold up well in reality, and unfortunately for kids like Little, these schools can be just as bad, if not worse, than adult prisons.
Right. And it's like, even if we're saying on the premise that you can reform people, you're not going to get reformed in a place like that.
Right, if they're abusing you, there's no way you're getting reformed.
Nope.
So these institutions are often punitive, harsh, and known for cultures of abuse. There is no real evidence that juvenile residential facilities actually offer anything close to a solid foundation for adulthood, or that they reduce the likelihood of repeat offenses. Now, Samuel Little, of course, he would go on to repeat offend again and again. A 2015 MIT study looked at about 10,000 young people in Chicago who got caught up with the law. These researchers found that in over a 10-year period, the people incarcerated as kids or teens were 23% more likely to end up in prison as adults, especially when compared with young people that avoided incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Wow.
this result held...
Well, because it fucks up your development 100%.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you got to wonder, because I was a troublemaker as a teen, and I got arrested once, but I was never incarcerated, and that may have helped me a lot not being incarcerated.
100%, and probably a large part of that was because you're white.
Yeah, 110% on that one.
Now, did getting arrested scare you straight at all, or was it just like minor inconvenience?
No, it was a minor inconvenience. It didn't really slow us down that much. But to be fair, we were already slowing down by the time I got arrested, you know. Yeah, I don't know how to explain that one. The punishment, I ended up having to do 50 hours of community service, and they made me do it at it was an art theater kind of thing. I helped build sets for a theater company, and I laughed because if I had applied for that job, I wouldn't have gotten it, but I was forced to do it. It was just really funny. So in the end, it wasn't...
Yeah, a lot of people love doing that stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't much of a punishment, so I can't really complain.
And you ended up involved in theater.
That's ironically, I was already involved in theater. That's what made it so funny, was I was already, when I wasn't out causing trouble, I was already doing theater. And then I got to go in and help.
That's wild.
It was so funny. I was like, if I had auditioned for a part in one of the plays that this company was putting out, they wouldn't have taken me. And so it was just funny that there I was building sets with them. And I laughed. I walked away from that 50 hours just like, yeah, thanks for the punishment.
Right.
Yeah, so the result of this held even when researchers controlled for what kind of crime was committed. A finding which seems to highlight the ineffective and even outright harmful impact of juvenile justice facilities. So basically, it doesn't matter what crime kids are committing. If they're incarcerated, they're more likely to repeat just by being incarcerated.
That makes sense. It starts to be like what life looks like.
Exactly. So while it's unclear if the time Little spent in reform school contributed to his violent actions, it certainly marked the beginning of what would be a life littered with offenses. At 15, he was arrested for burglary. At 16, he'd be convicted of breaking and entering, and by his mid-20s, according to a timeline created by investigators, he had been arrested 16 times across 11 states.
Holy shit.
Woof. And this is all for like burglary and breaking and entering.
Yeah,
like
minor
that.
stuff. To our knowledge, he has not killed anybody yet. Now, Little claims that he took up boxing during his stints in prison and referred to himself as a former prize fighter.
Oh, for the love.
And among the other charges besides burglary and theft, he was also convicted of fraud, assault, and rape, among other things.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
And I love it when we get to rape and then we don't
keep him in prison.
do something bigger. Don't keep him in prison.
Exactly.
That's where I start to draw the line.
So sometimes he'd be let go, and sometimes he would actually do the time in prison. So depending upon the crime, he sometimes wasn't even sent to incarceration. But regardless, each time he was released, nothing changed. It was only a matter of time before his next arrest. Samuel Little is an extreme example of repeat offenders within the criminal legal system. Repeat offenders are plentiful, and the courts must often stop really noticing them after a while. Let's be honest. Like, how many times you're like, oh, hey, Bob, you're back again. Here you go. Like, stupid.
Right.
So for him, it was, okay, here's another fine. Here's another 30 days in jail. and so on and so on, and he's never learning, or at least he doesn't give enough of a shit to learn. The system wasn't
Right.
the system wasn't designed for this carousel of revolving repeat offenders, and people like Little can often be overlooked, especially decades back. And maybe if our
Right. There's no like computer system that calls it all up and says, look at all of these, like maybe consider prior convictions here.
correct, especially when he's not doing all this in the same states.
Mm-hmm.
So I honestly think if our system had been designed to actually reduce crime rather than just punish criminals, maybe this would have played out differently.
Oh man, I think about that all the time.
Mm-hmm. One of these instances is Daryl Brosley's story, which could have played out very differently involving Samuel Little. So Daryl's mother, Mary Brosley, had disappeared when he was a kid. A long history of domestic violence and alcoholism had meant that Mary hadn't been able to care for Daryl and his sister, and so they were actually living with their great aunt when their mother stopped coming around. Now, Mary's sister, Claire, told detectives that her sister was a severe alcoholic and anorexic and only weighed about 80 pounds at 5 feet 4
Oh.
inches tall.
How is she still alive?
I don't know.
Barely.
Barely, yeah. There's nothing to her. Claire said that on the night before her sister disappeared, police found her walking along the highway. Mary told them that 2 men had pushed her out of a moving vehicle in Palmer, Massachusetts, and that her shoulder was hurt. The next day, she was supposed to take a bus back to Boston, where she was going to stay with her parents, but Mary never got there. Now, Daryl was an adult when he eventually discovered the truth about what had happened to his mother. Mary Brosley was only 33 at the time of her death and had been murdered on New Year's Day, 1971.
That's awful.
Samuel Little had lured her from a bar in Florida after a night of drinking. So somehow, the last time she was seen alive, she was in Massachusetts. She made her way to Florida.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Now, it's believed that Mary was Little's first victim. She struggled with addiction, she had an eating disorder, and she had this history of domestic violence. She had been estranged from her family. Her struggles were ones that so many people around the world face, and they also, that's what made her appealing to Samuel Little. She was vulnerable.
So he's picking on the weak.
Not only the weak, he's also picking on, she's vulnerable, she's black, and she has issues that people are kind of hands off on. She's almost
Right? People don't like to get metal.
Exactly.
And if she goes missing, it's not because of that. It's because of her issues.
Correct.
Not because of Sam. They
Exactly.
can blame it on her issue.
Yeah, she's an alcoholic. She went on a bender. We don't know where she is. Maybe we don't report her missing right away. Exactly. When Mary Brosley's body was discovered in a shallow grave weeks after her death, police couldn't identify her, and her blood alcohol levels were so high that they just assumed that that's what killed her. Her death wasn't classified as a homicide. Yeah, how fucked up is that?
Yeah, like, I wonder if I guess they had to do an autopsy if they knew her blood alcohol, but
Right.
it's crazy.
Well, and again, if he strangled her and she was missing if her body was exposed to the elements for a while, the strangulation may not have been obvious.
Yeah, it can really eliminate evidence, that's for sure.
So the truth of what actually happened to her didn't come out until Little began confessing to his murders over 40 years later.
Holy crud.
Yeah. But it would be 5 years and a dozen murders after Mary Brosley's death in 1976 that a young black woman living in Missouri would tell police that a man had kidnapped her on her walk home. The woman told investigators that her kidnapper had physically and sexually assaulted her, and once he fell asleep, she had made her escape, running as fast as she could to find help.
Oh,
Incredibly,
she barely escaped with her life.
yeah, I mean, she got lucky he fell asleep, which means he must have been really fucked
But
up.
that's sloppy work on his part. He should have, if he, really cared about keeping her captive and making her disappear, wouldn't you tie her up or something?
Something, but you don't know.
Some people will stay out of fear. I mean, it's really brave of her to even try to escape.
True.
And I'm not taking away from that, and I don't mean to. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like, normally if you're going to be this seasoned killer, you wouldn't make a mistake like that.
Incredibly, when investigators went to the location of the attack, they found Little asleep in his car.
Whoa.
Yep.
What?
But when police questioned him, Little denied the woman's story and claimed that she was a sex worker that he had paid with drugs for the sex. And he must have known...
What the fuck?
Well, he must have known that his story seemed a little on the unbelievable side. So he did admit to physically assaulting her, saying that he became angry with her. And despite his story, police did place him under arrest and charged him with rape. But the woman that he had attacked did struggle with heroin addiction, and investigators were convinced that she might actually have been a sex worker, even though she repeatedly stated that she wasn't.
So it's just criminal justice system failing her because stereotyping.
Exactly. Ultimately, prosecutors didn't feel that they had a strong enough case and felt the jury might not find her believable. Now, Little wasn't denying the physical assault, and he ended up with a deal. 90 days in jail and $100 fine.
90 days?
That's it?
That's it.
Holy crap.
And $100 fine, which maybe back in the 50s, 60s was a lot, but still, fuck that.
I don't really give a shit about a fine. Fuck you.
Agreed. 90 days in jail for raping someone. Although, again, he's claiming he paid her for her services and blah, blah, blah. But still. Because you got to wonder, like...
Fucked.
Yeah, because in that situation, if a sex worker, for example, is consensual, you're paying for it, it's still consensual. It's illegal, but you're paying for it. So if he's claiming that, then it really does become this weird, you know what I mean, who's being honest? It's fucked up. From the police's
right, but it's
point
also
of
like,
view.
even if they're just saying he was convicted of just assault, right? Regular assault.
Right.
Assaults within that sort of power dynamic, the fact that only carries
90 days?
90 days, and with his history. Crazy. That's what's crazy to me.
Absolutely crazy. I agree with you. At the time of that attack in 1976, Melinda Laprie, known as Mindy by her friends and family, was 16 years old. Bob Laprie described Mindy, his younger sister, as brilliant, a musical genius who could teach herself any instrument. But as we've seen so many times, it's the good people that the predators seek out. Mindy's mom had passed away when she was only 7, and in the years that followed, she endured repeated abuse by her father. She eventually ran away, and she started using drugs. In her early 20s,
Poor thing.
She gave birth to a son who her family adopted and raised for her. Now, Mindy had been dealt an extremely hard hand and was doing what she could to get by. She ended up moving with her boyfriend to Mississippi in 1982, and a few months later, a now 22-year-old Mindy began making her income as a sex worker.
Ugh.
Mindy was with a group of sex workers the night she got into a beige station wagon with a man that had offered her $20 for a date.
What?
Yeah, $20 back in 1982. I don't know how much that's worth today, but it's certainly not enough to do any of that.
Yeah, no.
It is if you're desperate and you have nothing, which is just awful.
That's true. Well, the man whose car she got into unfortunately turned out to be Samuel Little.
Ugh.
The next morning, when a body was found in a nearby cemetery, investigators determined that the manner of death was homicide. They'd even been able to determine that the method was strangulation. But they didn't know who she was. Mindy's family was concerned when she went missing. Her brother Bob stated that police wrote off his sister's disappearance because of the lifestyle she had been living.
Of course. His pattern is becoming very clear.
Right. And again, these are the most vulnerable among us. The only people more vulnerable than sex workers are probably homeless people.
There's a lot of people who are both.
Exactly.
Awful.
It was only after her brother's repeated urging that the unidentified body found in the cemetery be tested that dental records would confirm that this woman was in fact Mindy.
Oh.
Incredibly, police would eventually track down Little based off of the description of his beige station wagon, which was given by folks who had been there the night that Mindy had disappeared. Investigators spoke with 2 other sex workers, both of whom were black, who said that a man fitting Little's description had previously choked them on quote-unquote dates.
Oh, fuck.
But despite these accounts and the witnesses who saw Mindy leave that night, the night she disappeared, a jury would not decide to indict Little for her murder.
How?
Oh.
No idea, man.
What kind of sick? Oh my God.
Just not enough proof.
Yeah, like it's
Fitting a description. I mean, famously, fitting a description is how people get misconvicted,
exactly. And this is
especially black people
right, and this
in
is
this country.
pre DNA as well.
Yeah. So, like, you almost want to say, like, I'm kind of surprised they didn't just put him away for being a black man in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Maybe if it was this was in the South. This was Mississippi. You're right. I'm surprised it hasn't happened. Huh.
But, you know, you never know what really went on. We weren't in the room where it happened.
Very true. So her brother Bob Lepre believed that the investigators didn't really seem that invested in solving Mindy's case. He suspected that because the women were involved were sex workers and folks with drug addictions, that prosecutors didn't feel that they would be believable as witnesses.
I mean, I agree, probably, that he with this guy's line of argument that the prosecutors aren't trying that hard.
Yeah, 100%. And despite former investigators' insistence that Bob's suspicions were inaccurate, we all know that law enforcement is biased against both sex workers and women of color. Kind of repeating ourselves
Absolutely.
here. And then in 1984, Little was caught assaulting and strangling a woman in his car. He was arrested and charged, and investigators were able to connect Little and this assault to yet another attack on a woman who had survived by playing dead after her attacker had attempted to strangle her to death.
Holy shit. And the fact that I'm like, okay, so we put him away now?
You'd
Right,
think so.
come on, let's do something. And come on.
Well, like a broken record, Little would do what he always did in these situations. He said that the women were sex workers who tried to manipulate him, and this time they were trying to steal his money.
Oh, sure.
One woman would admit during the course of the trial that she hadn't told the truth to police about being a sex worker, and the other victim showed up in court to testify while she was under the influence of drugs.
Oh,
crap.
Yeah.
She probably couldn't cope with talking about her assault, her rape, her near-death experience.
Probably not. It's tough to say. But the jury only found Samuel Little guilty of one charge, and that was false imprisonment, completely acquitting him of kidnapping and sexual assault charges.
Even
That's
though
so
he's these
absurd.
past fucking convictions of it, it's crazy.
Yeah, we've said it 100 times. Repeat offenders
have.
should not be let out. That needs to be a law.
Right, at a certain point, you've proven yourself to be a danger.
Correct. Now, being found
And like
guilty...
you said 100 times, the only time it ever comes to light, or the only time it matters, is when it's too late.
Yeah, when it escalates. But he's already escalated to that point. He just failed a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
So for the false imprisonment charge, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison, but he would only serve 1 year before they let him out on parole.
Insane.
Yep. Unfortunately, in the case of Samuel Little, the failures of our broken legal system would continue playing out for nearly 3 more decades.
What?
Oh my fucking God.
Holy crud.
Yeah, this would continue until 2012 when Samuel Little was arrested again.
It was that long until he was arrested again?
Correct.
What?
Yeah. This time, DNA evidence that had been collected in 1987 and 1989 and saved somehow connected him to the murder of 3 women, Carol Elford, Guadalupe Apodaca, and Audrey Everett. However, despite the DNA linking him to these crimes, Little insisted on his innocence, which meant that these cases would go to trial. Now, the trial lasted for weeks, including testimony from numerous experts, witnesses, and surviving victims. It was likely the best case ever made against Samuel Little in all the years he had spent in court. And the jurors, they seemed to agree, because in September of 2014, Samuel Little was found guilty on all 3 first-degree murder charges.
It's about damn time.
He was 74 years old.
Yeah, well, at that point, it may not matter for much.
Well, Little found himself sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences in prison. Now, the quote-unquote justice came 7 years after he had last committed murder, and that certainly doesn't really feel like justice, if you ask me. Just saying.
No, it doesn't. Not at all.
Little had committed horrible crimes and needed to be held accountable for all of them, but here we are with only 3 murder convictions. For decades, Samuel Little murdered women, and for decades, the legal system let Samuel Little get away with it. Black serial killers are relatively unknown, a kind of question mark to the public. Even though black folks have been framed, scapegoated, targeted, and over-criminalized throughout history, this particular group, black serial killers, seem almost mythological. According to criminal justice professor Alan Branson, the false belief that black people are more inherently criminal actually dates back to enslavement, when black people who tried to fight back or escape imprisonment were labeled as a fugitive or criminal.
Right, like you're trying to free yourself from slavery, and that's a crime, which is why morality is not the same as law.
No, it's so
sometimes it's right to break the law.
Yeah, agreed. So time passes and laws change, but this sham, the idea of, black people are criminals, that sticks around. That still to this day is kind of like a racist thing they like to throw out. Although right now I think they're throwing them at Mexicans, right? Isn't that the new...
Of course, yeah. I mean, the racism certainly still affects black communities, but
Agreed.
Right now...
Yeah, right now ICE is going after...
people love to throw it at Latin Americans and love to be like, oh, well, you're criminals and awful shit. Fuck ICE.
Yeah, fuck all that. So as culture changes, white people with power invent new ways to turn black people into criminals. Fugitive slave laws became the Black Codes, which morphed into Jim Crow segregation, which ultimately became mass incarceration and the racist war on drugs. Now, Branson, the professor, argues that black criminalization is specific. Racism spins the story, the stereotype about black people as unintelligent and even animalistic criminals. If it doesn't fit the media story, the police story of serial killers as cunning and charming and highly intelligent, someone like Ted Bundy, he can be a serial killer. But Samuel Little, this relatively uneducated black man, he can't be a serial killer. Do you see how that works?
That's a very good point.
Wow.
That doesn't fit the narrative.
No, it doesn't. And it's funny how they just refuse to see it for so long.
Right. It's like it's condescending and racist, but ultimately sort of helps this guy escape.
And it's interesting because this writer, Alan Branson, explains that the public doesn't want to hear about perpetrators they can't relate to. Like he writes, Ted Bundy was a law student. Jeffrey Dahmer was frequently described as attractive, and John Wayne Gacy owned his own business. All of these killers had these traits the society says are desirable and unconscious, and they have this unconscious bias that they are white. So if Samuel's Little life story is less relatable to a white audience than Ted Bundy's, then one can imagine that the same would be true of his victims. They just don't care.
Yeah. People just don't care about women of color, about sex workers, about the particularly high rates of violence that they face. It's fucked up.
It's fucked up. And the majority of violent crimes are committed by a person who is the same race as their victim. So victims of white serial killers are white, and most victims of black serial killers are black. So here we are.
Very interesting.
Do the police really give a shit? That's the question. According to the Washington Post, 68 of the 93 women that Little confessed to killing were black.
Wow.
And you heard those numbers right. He claims he killed 93 people.
And that's him confessing.
Correct.
I'm hard pressed to believe that there'd be that many.
Well, we
I mean, it was over so many years.
yeah, and I didn't want to not waste time. I didn't want to spend a lot of time going through each victim and their story because it's very repetitive in a lot of ways. So I apologize to the people who. Yeah, so the people who really wanted me to dig deep into that, I apologize. That's not what we're here to do. I feel like we're glorifying it at that point, and that's not what I want to do.
Yeah, it's a little bit trauma porn.
Exactly. But it isn't coincidental that Samuel Little's victims were overwhelmingly black women. And we know because Little would admit to targeting people he didn't believe would be missed.
Oh.
He said, quote, "I'm not going over there into a white neighborhood to pick out a little teenage girl," unquote.
Ew.
Yeah.
The racism is coming from inside the house.
Exactly. But he also knows better. If a black man is driving around a white neighborhood to abduct somebody, that's going to stand out.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be investigated, and the jury's going to say, not care if there's less evidence.
Exactly. He also told writer Jillian Lauren in an interview from prison, quote, "I never killed nobody like my smart baby here. I never killed no senators or governors or fancy New York journalists. Nothing like that. I killed you. It would be all over the news the next day if I did. I stay in the ghettos," unquote.
Oh, there's some deep, dark fucked upness
As
to that.
dark and twisted as that quote is, it's what allowed him to get away with what he got away with for so long.
He knew
It's true.
And he knew what his limitations were. He knew he'd get caught if he went into a white neighborhood and took, you know what I mean, or went after politicians. He knew.
Right.
So it was
You start killing CEOs and they'll give you the death penalty without evidence.
Right. I mean, that manhunt for the guy who shot the, what was it, United Healthcare thing? That was crazy.
Luigi!
So this was his strategy, and it was one that was too in line with the country's racism to be random. He understood it. According to the Washington Post, a police lieutenant in Mississippi, where Little murdered Mindy LaPierre, said, quote, "If you were an African-American female and you were in the process of any kind of prostitution or legal stuff, we just did not treat those crimes as crimes, to be perfectly honest with you," unquote.
Wow. I'm not that's obviously the truth, but it's shocking to hear someone say it.
Yeah. So fucked up. He didn't care. If you're black and a prostitute, we don't, whatever. Whatever happens to you, you deserved, is what I think he's saying.
Which is just so fucking vile.
Exactly. Another serial killer we will eventually cover, named Lonnie Franklin Jr., he was a Los Angeles serial killer who targeted sex workers and those struggling with addictions, and he'd evaded detection for 20 years, very similar to Samuel Little. So if you pick your targets right, nobody notices.
Well, and if you have the knowledge enough to know the demographic and the weaknesses, he could have gotten brazen after a little bit and been like, okay, I've been killing slum for a little bit. Now I'm going to step my game up and I'm going to go after a little white girl. If he was unintelligent, he could have done that and been caught so much quicker.
Right, but he understood where his lines were.
Right. And that knowledge, that's what I'm saying, is that knowledge also helped him. He was humble enough to know not to go outside of his target.
Right. He stayed in his lane in a weird way. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least one of the women Little murdered was trans. Several were disabled, and many struggled with drug addictions, and a majority were sex workers. All groups that our society treats as completely unworthy of time and attention most of the time.
Yeah, that's true. And just assumes that bad things should happen to them.
Right.
It's fucked. Did he ever kill any men, or was it all women?
All women. All women.
All women.
And if his victims held multiple of these identities, well, then they were considered truly disposable. So if you're
You're
black,
fucking right about that.
Yeah, they don't give a fuck. And that cop said it. So sex workers, despite...
Yeah, he said it out loud.
He
which
did.
Honestly, I respect more than people who try to try to act like they're not racist and there's no racism in police practicing. It's like
Exactly.
the honesty is something because it lets us look at the reality.
So sex workers, despite making up less than 1% of 1% of the U.S. population, made up 13% of all serial murder victims in the 70s.
Wow.
Wow.
That number would rise in the 80s to 21%, and again in the 90s to 31%,
Holy shit.
and yet again in the 2000s to 43%.
Holy shit. So
Whoa.
this is getting worse.
Yes.
Wow.
Because again, if you're going to target a victim that you don't want to get caught for, you go for the people that the society isn't paying attention to. So sex workers make up literally 0.3% of the U.S. population, but 43% of known serial murder victims, which is fucking crazy.
That's mind-blowing.
Wow.
Samuel Little stated he often saw himself as an angel of mercy, killing off folks that he considered were already half dead.
Oh, that's just fucked.
Mm-hmm. Despite the fact that black people make up only about 12% of the U.S. population, according to the FBI data in 2015, nearly 40% of adults arrested for sex work were black.
Wow.
And all of this ultimately continues a cycle where sex workers are considered easy targets for those looking to take advantage of the vulnerable. So maybe instead of treating sex work as taboo and relegating sex workers to the margins, we should decriminalize sex work and provide workers with basic services like, I don't know, access to healthcare, affordable housing, social services. I don't know. But that debate in our current political climate, that's not going to happen.
I'm 100% with you there.
Yeah.
When we make something illegal, we create a black market.
Exactly.
And black markets create violence.
However, with that said, because I typed up that line months ago, and I have been paying attention to something happening in the Seattle area. So Seattle sort of decriminalized sex work. There's a whole street in Seattle where women are literally walking around in lingerie, waving at every car that goes by them, right? We know what they're there for. Well, once that was allowed, it wasn't long before violence and gunfights were breaking out on those same streets as people fought for control over these women. So unfortunately, as much as it would be great to decriminalize it and try to work it into a system in some way, we have to go deeper than just saying, okay, we won't arrest you for standing on a street corner, because it created other problems.
Right. And it's also, there's a distinction between decriminalizing and legalizing.
Correct.
Because if you make it legal, then you start having worker protections.
Right. That's true too.
And we see it's legal in parts of Nevada, right?
It's legal in all but one county of Nevada. Las Vegas County.
Is that what it is? Right.
Las
it's
Vegas,
not legal in Las Vegas.
Exactly. Which is ironic because that's where probably most of it's happening.
Oh, right. Well, I've been to Vegas one time and everything was like, yeah, you just got to get out of here and then you can get some.
Right. So.
But obviously I wasn't looking for that.
Well, I mean, but who knows? Because there are countries where it's legal, like Thailand and Vietnam, and I mean, there's a ton of countries that have sex tourism, and while it's relegated, there are still dangers there, you know. So
of course, it's certainly still a dangerous line of work, but I think we don't help anyone by it being
completely
illegal, and by punishing people who are probably already being punished.
Agreed, because I mean, I'm not counting these other countries, but here in the U.S., I would argue most sex workers aren't there because that's what they've always wanted to do. Right.
It's a place you end up often because you're vulnerable to start with.
Right. You need money, and it's an easy way to make money because it's not like you're selling drugs where you have a limited supply of product. You know, so. And even though we've been discussing this repeatedly, I'm going to say, but again, if we had had some of these systems in place, maybe if our culture cared about the well-being of sex workers, including those who are Black, Indigenous, disabled, or trans, then maybe all of this could have turned out differently. And I know we've said that earlier, but it's frustrating, and I have to reiterate that. Like, we could have done better. So maybe Little's victims wouldn't have, over and over again, had their deaths misclassified as accidental. Maybe disappearances that were never taken seriously would have been investigated. And maybe Little could have been appropriately treated for his violence one of the many times he was caught.
Yep.
You know, maybe survivors would have been given accesses to resources they needed to heal, and maybe Little's decades of violence could have been cut short. Maybe his...
Oh, it definitely would have.
Right. Maybe his claim of 93 women could have actually had the opportunity to live. It's so fucked up.
It's so fucked up.
When asked if something like Samuel Little could happen again, former FBI agent Brad Garrett said, "Of course, yes." After his conviction, Little eventually began confessing to his other murders, but only after numerous bribes. The Washington... Yeah, right? I mean, that's how it sometimes goes, you know. The Washington Post reported that working with the FBI, a Texas Ranger named Jim Holland coaxed Little to talk with promises that he would make his story become known, and that he would get him McDonald's and candies and a TV. They were literally giving him these things just to get him to confess and give them more information.
Wow.
So Little, who loved art, was even told that maybe they could arrange for him to have an art studio on the inside. The irony of bribing someone to obtain a confession is considered legitimate, even though it sounds sketchy, and indicates that something is seriously broken if that's how we have to get information.
Right.
Oh, definitely.
And sometimes I feel like that does the same thing as torture, just in the opposite direction, where you might just get a false confession because it's just they'll do anything to get the reward.
Right. It's funny, you just made me realize you do not know who the Confessions killer is. Henry Lee Lucas? All right.
No idea.
Yeah, we're going to be covering that one relatively soon, too. It's going to blow your fucking mind.
All right, friends. Well, there's another Joyous' information.
Oh, my goodness. So while a bribery certainly creates perverse incentives for folks to give false confessions, like you were just saying, investigators say that they have confirmed over 50 of Little's admissions with information that not only gave new wind to cold cases, but provided supporting evidence for several false convictions. So innocent people, like a man named Jerry Townsend, was sent to prison for crimes they didn't commit. According to the Washington Post, Jerry Townsend, a black man from Florida with severe mental disabilities, he had pled guilty to charges which accused him of 6 murders and a sexual assault. And he pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. Now, one of the murders he was accused of was that of a 17-year-old black woman named Dorothy Gibson. Her murder was eventually linked to Samuel Little. Jerry Townsend would spend 22 years locked away before the case against him was eventually dropped. And
Whoa.
Can you imagine 22 years in prison just because you were like, fuck, they'll put me to death?
No way. I'd be so pissed.
I'm sure he sued the state of Florida, would be my guess, but...
He better have.
Absolutely.
Now, interestingly, as he's confessing, they're giving him the things that they're promising, including art supplies. And he began to draw, and it was a hobby that he picked up during one of his earlier stints in prison. With an incredible amount of memory for details of what his victims looked like before his death, Little completed at least 30 vivid color sketches of women that he had murdered.
Oh, that's creepy as fuck.
It's crazy. And the crazier part is that when put against cold case victims, they're spot on. They were able to identify some of his victims this way. The drawings were eventually released to the public with notes Little gave about what he remembered about each victim. And a few of his drawings have been used to link Little to cold cases. But for others, the drawings have represented everything that we may never know. So Bernice Talley, who was 5 years old when her mother disappeared, is convinced that one of Little's drawings is her mother, Zena Jones. And Little's recollection of what happened to the person in his drawing seems to fit Zena remarkably well. She was a young black woman who had disappeared from Memphis in the summer of 1990. Zena's family had wondered what happened to her for decades. And even now, when investigators have a chance to bring some answers to this grieving family, the same patterns of inefficient investigation seems to hold sway. Bernice and her family told the Washington Post that the FBI interviewed them and picked up a few photos of Zena, but they haven't heard from the FBI since. No one has even asked anyone in the family for a DNA sample to compare against the unidentified remains of a John Doe found in Memphis. And they believe that...
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. And they believe that woman was in one of Little's drawings. Zena's family hasn't been added to the national pool of DNA kept for folks of missing relatives, a pool that is routinely tested against anything when new victims are found, like unidentified victims. They know they have a missing family member, and the FBI could give a shit about adding their family's DNA to the database.
That's so fucked.
Which is bizarre and probably racist.
Yeah, absolutely.
A police lieutenant in the Memphis Homicide Bureau would tell the Washington Post reporters that the COVID-19 pandemic had slowed down their investigation, and it perhaps provided an explanation for the lack of resolution in the year 2020, but Zena Jones has been missing for over 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of hard to take that into account. So Zena's mother had gone to the police after she went missing in 1990, but the family would tell the Washington Post that the investigators didn't seem very interested in finding Zena because she was an adult and she had struggled with drugs. Now,
yep, there it is again.
Again, he chose his victims perfectly. And it's really sad that Samuel Little died in the final days of 2020, leaving behind a nearly 40-year legacy of destruction, violence, and pain. Angela Williamson, a governmental official who worked on the case, told the Washington Post that if Little had confessed, if Little had not confessed, most of this would not have been solved.
Wow.
It
would have just fallen by the wayside.
Yeah, there would just been 90-something unsolved cases. Granted, there's still like 50 unsolved cases. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, this is a horrifying reminder of just how little justice the so-called criminal justice system actually offers. All told, it is believed that Samuel Little killed over 90 women, many of whom cannot be confirmed, and with his death, there is little hope of solving any more.
Ugh.
Right now, we're going to take a moment to list all of his victims. Just take a moment to honor them, because they're the most important part of the story, but unfortunately, we didn't want to spend a lot of time covering them, throughout, because it would have just, been repetitive. So here are the known victims. There's Mary Jo Brosley, a woman he believes was named Linda, another that he believed was named Marianne, another he believed was named Donna or Sarah, Sarah Brown, Agatha White Buffalo, a woman he thought was named Kat, Leola Etta Bryant, Martha Cunningham, a woman he remembered being named Emily, Leanne Helms, Yvonne Pless, Clara Birdlong, Julia Critchfield, Evelyn Weston, Brenda Alexander, Linda Sue Boards, Patricia Parker, Fedonia Smith, Rosie Hill, Patricia Ann Mount, Dorothy Richard, Melinda Lepre, Frances Campbell, Linda Bennett, Alice Denise Duval, Roberta Tendatrich, Alice Denise Taylor, Tracy Lynn Johnson, a woman he believes was named Ruth, Ruby Dean Lane, Yolanda Jones, Melissa Thomas, Daisy McGuire, a woman he claimed went by the name Team Money, Priscilla Baxter Jones, and Nancy Carol Stevens. That's the list of known victims of Samuel Little. And we should definitely take a moment to remember them, Because again, the victims are the most important part of these stories, these cases. But in a case like this, it's hard to give them all their due time. So for that, in many ways, we're saddened. But without making this multiple episodes, which is not something we'd wanted to do, we decided to do it this way and focus on the deeper issues, like the socio and economic aspects of it, rather than the gratuitous violence of it all. And that is the case of Samuel Little.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Just another sad fucking story.
It blows my mind. We've said it a million times. They got to stop letting repeat offenders out. They need to.
They gotta. There's gotta be a certain point where we're like, this is what this person's gonna do. We have to think about it.
Yeah, just in our 130 something episodes, we've seen the pattern enough. You'd think the justice system would have figured it out by now.
All right, let's create our own justice system and have it be like the common sense department, and we can do it all by ourselves.
Vigilante justice?
Yeah. Yeah, instead of the Justice League, we're the Vigilante Justice League. There you go.
Yeah.
But all right, thank you everyone for joining us. Once again, I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.